The story of Peter Gabriel. Part 3. All about the album, Peter Gabriel 3, Melt.
Personnel. Peter Gabriel. Vocals, piano, synthesizer on start, I Don't Remember, Games Without Frontiers and Not One of Us. Drum pattern on Biko. Backing vocals on Intruder, Family Snapshot and Not One of Us. Whistle on Games Without Frontiers.
Kate Bush, backing vocals on No Self-Control and Games Without Frontiers.
Dave Gregory, electric guitar on I Don't Remember and Family Snapshot.
Robert Fripp, electric guitar on No Self-Control, I Don't Remember, and Not One of Us.
David Rhodes, guitar on all tracks except Start. Backing vocals on Intruder, I Don't Remember and Not One of Us.
Paul Weller, electric guitar on and Through the Wire. Larry Fast, synthesizer on Intruder, No Self-Control, Start, Games Without Frontiers, and Biko. Processing on No Self-Control, I Don't Remember, and Not One of Us. Bagpipes on Biko.
John Giblin, bass guitar on No Self-Control, Family Snapshot, and Through the Wire, Games Without Frontiers, and Not One of Us.
Tony Levin, on Chapman Stick.
Jerry Murata, drums on I Don't Remember, Family Snapshot, and Through the Wire, Games Without Frontiers, Not One of Us, Lead a Normal Life in Biko. Percussion on Games Without Frontiers and Not One of Us.
Phil Collins. Drums on Intruder and No Self-Control. Drum pattern on Intruder. Snare on Family Snapshot. Serto on Biko.
Dick Morrissey, saxophone on Start, Family Snapshot, No Self-Control and Lead a Normal Life.
Morris Pert, percussion on Intruder, No Self-Control and Lead a Normal Life. Dave Ferguson, screeches on Biko.
Steve Lillywhite, whistles on Games Without Frontiers. Hugh Padgham, whistles on Games Without Frontiers.
Production personnel.
Steve Lillywhite, producer.
Hugh Padgham, producer.
Studios.
Manor Mobile in Bath, England.
The Townhouse in London, England.
Release date, May 30th, 1980.
Chart placings. UK 1. US 22. Labels. Great Britain, Charisma. United States of America, Geffen. Preparation.
In the late 70s, it was better not to flaunt any progressiveness in your music. Throwing Pink Floyd, Sex Pistols, or Genesis and the Boomtown Rats on the same stage guaranteed a brawl in front of the stage. It is no wonder that such events did not take place. Gabriel did not arouse such antipathy among the punk audience, and the progressive audience still respected him. When he performed with the American band Television, he received an ovation, despite the risk of a cold reception. In 1978, he also played as a support for the Stranglers.
I wanted to play for the Stranglers, because they were considered a typical punk band, you know, dangerous and rebellious.
He later said,
It was a really interesting experience to perform for a punk audience, and see if I could handle it. In the end, everything went according to plan. I did well and I liked it.
I know something about
Rob and Gab.
Peter Gabriel and Tom Robinson together. Peter Gabriel ended 1978 with a joint Christmas concert with fellow new wave musician Tom Robinson. Under the name Rob and Gab, the gentlemen performed at London's Hammersmith Odeon. The event was spontaneous, as it was the result of a calendar misunderstanding. Someone had inadvertently booked the venue for Gabriel and Robinson for the same date, and instead of rebooking the concert and changing their plans, they were persuaded to join forces. Elton John and Phil Collins appeared on stage as guests. The famous journalist Chris Welch wrote about this event.
Tom Robinson, like a brotherly guide, took the novice Peter under his wing and both stood boldly before the school crowd. Elton John, a simple boy from the older class, provided some heavy hits on his keyboard. The percussion power was provided by the old master Phil Collins. The whole evening was full of surprises. It was intriguing to see Rob and Gab, as they called themselves, swapping songs, although Tom put up a real fight with the difficult Salisbury Hill. Gabriel returned the favor by singing, among others, Robinson's Holdout.
In 1979, Gabriel performed very rarely because he was in the process of preparing and recording his third solo album. Here's an example of how a tragic accident united Kate Bush and Peter Gabriel in grief and led to one of Prague's most inspired partnerships. On May 12, 1979, Gabriel performed as a guest at the Kate Bush concert at Hammersmith Odeon, London, England. In 1979, an accidental death during Kate Bush's UK tour led to a chance meeting with Peter Gabriel, and a creative partnership was born from tragedy. When Kate Bush embarked on her groundbreaking The Tour of Life in spring 1979, it turned the notion of a live concert on its head. Fully choreographed by Anthony Van Lass, the sold-out 28-date tour was a visualization of her first two albums, The Kick Inside and Lionheart. However, for Bush, it would end up being overshadowed by the tragic, accidental death of Bill Duffield, her 21-year-old lighting director. On April 2, 1979, after a warm-up gig at Pool Art Center, Duffield was undertaking the so-called idiot check, where the final crew member present inspects the entire performance area to make sure nothing has been left behind. He fell 17 feet through an unlit open panel on the stage to a concrete floor below and died a week later in hospital from his injuries. A memorial concert for Duffield was planned at the end of Bush's tour on May 12th at Hammersmith Odeon. Bush and her band were joined on stage by Peter Gabriel and Steve Harley, both of whom had worked with Duffield. Gabriel and Harley tackled various Bush songs, Them Heavy People, A Rename the Woman with the Child in Her Eyes, and played their own songs, Gabriel's Here Comes a Flood, and I Don't Remember, Harley's Best Years of Our Lives and Come Up and See Me, before everyone came on stage for a cover of the Beatles' Let It Be. If Duffield had not died, Bush and Gabriel may not have met. They hit it off immediately. Gabriel's painstakingly free approach to his work was to inform her in a way few artists had ever done. The meeting had a profound effect on her. Within months, she would be singing on Gabriel's third album, and through those recording sessions, she first encountered the Fairlight CMI synthesizer. Years later, in 1986, she accompanied him on one of his most powerful statements. In 1979, Gabriel also performed at Aylesbury. Here's what CJK wrote about that event. The concert took place at the Friars, Maxwell Hall, Aylesbury, England on the August 17, 1979, and the review was published in Midweek, High Wycombe, England on the September 4, 1979. Loud noises and bombast. Peter Gabriel's visit to Aylesbury Friars last week attracted a capacity crowd, but somehow failed to live up to expectations. Since leaving Genesis, of whom he was a founder member, Gabriel has gained much street credibility by his refusal to give in to the music biz. He has turned out two immensely enjoyable albums, full of eccentricity, solid rock, and the occasional very tuneful ballad. Sadly, the only facet on show at Friars was a self-indulgent tendency towards loud noises and bombast. Stalking the stage in a yellow jumpsuit, Gabriel still retained the crispness that helped foster his image. But his vocals were lost amidst the cacophony produced by a six-piece band. Phil Collins of Genesis made a rapturously received appearance to drown the sound of the rest of the band. Gabriel had a sax player who could be heard only when no one else was playing, and a guitarist who couldn't even be heard during his solos. Such was the racket. All of Gabriel's singing and songwriting talent was lost in the muddied mix. Sadly, Gabriel seems to have abandoned the role of outsider, the watcher in the skies, and gone full pelt for commercial respectability. CJK.
Two of you still laugh at me for being timid as a lamb. Baby, still
In the same year, Peter Gabriel also appears at the festival in Reading. The entire festival lasted 3 days, August 24, 25, and 26, 1979. The first day was headlined by The Police, the second by Thin Lizzy, and the third by Peter Gabriel. As it later turned out, the band Thin Lizzy was replaced by Scorpions. In addition to the artists mentioned above, the event also featured The Cure, Motorhead, Steve Hackett, Whitesnake, and Cheap Trick. Gabriel's band had a rather unusual lineup. Here it is: Peter Gabriel, keyboards, vocals; David Jackson, alto saxophone; John Giblin, bass; Phil Collins, drums, backing vocals; J.O. Partridge, guitar; Jeff Wesley, keyboards; Preston Heyman, percussion. Here's what James Belzy wrote about Gabriel's concert. This show took place at the Bath Pavilion, Bath, England on the August 23rd, 1979. And the article about this show was published in the Evening Post, Bristol, Avon, England on the August 21st, 1979. Peter returns, seen with James Belzy. Peter Gabriel, the frontman who led Genesis to superstar proportions and then retired to live quietly in Bath, goes back on stage this week. He won't have to travel far from his home in Walcott, Bath, because the venue is the Bath Pavilion, and the show is on Thursday night. The lineup of his band will include drummer Phil Collins, who now takes lead vocals in Gabriel's place with today's Genesis. Gabriel's total retirement from the rock music scene lasted something like a year, and then he returned with the internationally successful Peter Gabriel Scratch album last year. He made a hugely successful tour and is now gathering his energies for a new album, much of it already recorded, and a possible UK tour. Kevin Draper, the Bristol promoter behind this week's gig, said, "Peter is headlining the Reading Rock Festival on Sunday, and he wanted to do a warm-up in front of a live audience. We got to know each other not so long ago, and I have taken him tapes by a local band and musicians because he takes close interest in the Bristol Bath scene. Bath, his adopted home, seemed a good place to try things out before the really big date at the weekend, and it should be an outstanding evening." Gabriel's involvement with the local scene has proved very helpful to some bands. For instance, he has befriended highly rated Bath band interview, including joining them on stage at one recent Bath date, and they've been picked up and recorded by a national record company. Gabriel is also involved in discussions about a film based on the Genesis album The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. His tribute to his adopted West Country home came on that Peter Gabriel album. It was a track, Salisbury Hill, about the hill on the Chippenham side of Bath, and it went on to become a single hit.
I was sure another me. Today I don't need a replacement. I show them what the smile
And here's a review of the same concert, this time written by Chris Hewitt. So once again, this show took place at the Bath Pavilion, Bath, England on the August 23rd, 1979, and the review was published in the Evening Post, Bristol, Avon, England on the August 24th, 1979.
By the way, the Pavilion, also known as Bath Pavilion, is a multi-purpose venue. Originally opened as a skating rink, it later became a music hall and wedding venue. In the 1960s, the Pavilion hosted some of the biggest names in rock and roll, such as the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, Pink Floyd, and Led Zeppelin.
The center.
Gabriel's Heavenly Music. Bath Pavilion, Peter Gabriel. Peter Gabriel has always been respected as the genuine reluctant superstar, the hero who refuses to compromise. And so he proved on his triumphant homecoming concert in Bath. A packed and largely ecstatic audience bayed for classic Gabriel material, and the former Genesis frontman kicked off with a new band, a new show, and some very new songs. Although the full house gave him every encouragement on his warm-up for the forthcoming Reading Festival show, the early part of last night was slightly frustrating because of Duff's sound. Encore. Then, Gabriel seemed to say, "Right, I've done my stuff. Now here's what you want." And there were Modern Love, Humdrum, and a superb Moribund the Burgermeister. The effect was that of a runaway train as the atmosphere grew ever more intense. Salisbury Hill, the song dedicated to the peak near Bath where Gabriel sat and decided to leave Genesis just as they attained millionaire status, was received like a long-lost hero. As an encore, Gabriel and Phil Collins put on the Old Pals Act for The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, the song which more than any other signaled Peter's departure for new pastures and Collins' appointment as guaranteed superstar. And as if that wasn't enough, Gabriel brought on Tom Robinson for a marvelous bully for you to close the show. Chris Hewitt.
BBC Christmas Special. On December 28, 1979, Peter Gabriel appeared on the Christmas program Christmas BBC TV Special, hosted by Kate Bush. Kate Bush presents her Christmas special in which she performs songs from her first 3 albums, along with December Will Be Magic Again. This performance took place in Birmingham at BBC Pebble Mill Studios, England. Gabriel appeared on the show twice. First, he sang his song Here Comes the Flood. Then he duetted with Kate Bush on Another Day.
The velvet storms and the rains that fell, here comes the man with his tale to tell, and some have named him Peter, the angel Gabriel.
When the night shows the signal
Here's what Kate Bush said about these two songs in an interview given in 2019 on the 40th anniversary of this performance. Peter Gabriel's theme song, And Here Comes the Flood, composed by Peter Gabriel. Is this a Christmas song? No, neither of these songs are Christmas songs. Is this a song about death? Not sure, but it's depressing as hell. Is it unreleased? No, Here Comes the Flood was the closer on Gabriel's 1977 record. A direct quote from my notes, she wrote a theme song for Peter Gabriel. We cut to Kate and two other singers, one of whom is her older brother and frequent creative collaborator Patty Bush, who sing what can only be described as a Peter Gabriel theme song. Through velvet storms and the rains that fell, here comes the man with his tale to tell. And some have named him Peter, the angel, Gabriel. Peter Gabriel at a piano then proceeds to play the most depressing song you ever heard. Why is Peter Gabriel here? This is the point in the special where you really start to realize anything could happen. This is Kate Bush's world, and we're just living in it. The tonal shift between them heavy people and Peter Gabriel's somber Here Comes the Flood is so jarring it made me laugh out loud when he first started playing those sad little piano notes. Here Comes the Flood is a really beautiful song, but his sudden dramatic appearance and Kate's complete lack of involvement with this number is really indicative of the bizarre tonal shifts we see in this special.
Lord, here comes the flood. We'll say goodbye to flesh and blood. If again the seas are silent and any still alive, it'll be those who gave their island to survive. Drink up, dreamers, you're running dry.
Another Day, duet with Peter Gabriel, Roy Harper cover. Is this a Christmas song? No. Is this a song about death? No, but it's depressing as hell. Is it unreleased? No, it's a cover of a 1970 Roy Harper track. Gabriel and Bush had plans to record and release it at some point, but never did. A direct quote from my notes, I don't know what to say about this. Peter Gabriel comes back to perform a duet of Roy Harper's Another Day. It's not a Christmas song, but it's an extremely depressing song about reflecting on what could have been with a former lover. Peter and Kate really sell it, performing both the past and present versions of the couple. It's a beautiful performance, but it's hard not to laugh when you remember that A, this is ostensibly a Christmas special, and B, it's preceded by the wedding list and followed by, well, it's not exactly festive at all, but it doesn't matter because the iconic Kate Bush serves enough looks and delivers enough camp value to ensure there's never a boring second throughout any of the 44-minute runtime. She has one of the greatest voices of all time and so many bangers. I'm so glad this Christmas special exists, and I'm sure I will revisit this in the future. Oh, and Peter Gabriel is decent too, of course, but come on, we all know this would have been just as incredible if he wasn't a part of it.
Termination of the contract. When the album was finally completed in February 1980, Gail went to New York with the tapes.
I made a mistake of making them sit down and listen to it,
said Gail.
Atlantic's head of A&R John Collender, managing director Jerry Greenberg, and the president and founder of Atlantic Records, Ahmet Ertegun. They all sat in the room while Gail Carlson attempted to explain every song as they went along, but was met with hostility.
Ertegun said,
"There was no point in writing a song about Biko because no one in America was aware what was happening in South Africa."
He thought Family Snapshot was too controversial. The song is based on the thoughts of an assassin stalking his prey. And when he heard "Lead a Normal Life" about conformity, he asked if Peter had any mental problems. The meeting went downhill, remembered Gail.
I think they had decided they were going to drop him.
Kolodner didn't want Lily White. He had wanted an American whiz kid. They broke up for lunch, and Gail met them again in the afternoon. Gail recounts a tense meeting. At one point, the men turned to Gail and said,
"We have an idea. When Peter comes to his senses, we will have the next album."
To this Gail replied firmly.
That's not on. You either have him or you don't.
So they passed. Kolodner concluded the album,
It would be commercial suicide,
believing it would not sell above their minimum requirement of 100,000. Atlantic was forced to pay Charisma Records £75,000 for passing on the option. The album would have been Gabriel's last for the Atlantic anyway, as his contract was due for renewal.
Peter says,
The album was full of what at the time were strange sounds. I remember when I met Ahmet Erdogan, founder of Atlantic Records, and he'd first heard that record, which Atlantic later dropped. He'd asked if I'd been hospitalized myself, and obviously thought that I'd gone from being some sort of pop artist to some strange backwater. In the end, Polygram took the record up in America, and it did quite well, with some success for Games Without Frontiers. But at the time, I remember the A&R guys were trying to encourage me to sound like the Doobie Brothers. One of the main jobs of the A&R department of a record company is to try and make records that they're going to sell. So they look at what's selling at the moment, and they try and get all of their artists to sound like that. At the same time, to be fair, I've worked with some really good A&R people who've made some very good musical points and have a lot of interesting input, but I'm very fortunate to have grown up in a time, in the post-60s, when artists were allowed to get on making their own mistakes, doing what they needed to do. You could listen to your record company, but you didn't have to.
The streets are lined with camera crews. Everywhere he goes is news. Today is different. Today is not the same.
His latest LP is at number 6 on the album chart, and his single, Games Without Frontiers, is rapidly becoming a hit. It's interesting to note that when he released this new album, his American record company dropped him like a hot potato, hinting that he was committing commercial suicide.
Well, I think initially I knew they didn't like it. They sent someone over, an A&R person, who other than attempting to encourage me to make one track sound like the Doobie Brothers, didn't really like the way it was going. I think they felt that with my second album I moved a little to the left, and with this album that I'd gone off the edge of the universe, and it wasn't an area that they were particularly familiar with or wanted to be involved with, and didn't think was going to generate them any income. So both the album and myself as an artist were given the big elbow. So, which, I mean, I thought they would just put it out and not bother with it. But it's fine with me, because if they don't want to work it, then maybe someone else can. And then the album, particularly in Europe, has done very well. So that's been somewhat encouraging, and in fact I think Atlantic did try and buy it back again, so there's a certain amount of self-satisfaction from that.
So lined with camera crews. Everywhere he goes is news. Today is different. Today is not the same. Today I'll make the action. Take snapshot into the light. Snapshot into the light. I'm shooting into the light.
At this time, Anna and Melanie were both confirmed and christened at the Self-Realization Fellowship in Los Angeles.
It was lovely, actually, a mill in the middle of this wonderful lake, and they were christened in 6 different religions,
said Jill.
Search.
If it weren't for the Genesis past, the new wave audience at that time could have treated Peter as their man. He had 2 albums of rather simple, feisty, guitar music under his belt, which were not commercially successful, and besides, he was bald. However, this was not a calculation, but rather a manifestation of internal changes, incidentally shared with Jill, who also cut her beautiful, long hair. The year 1978 can be described as the culmination of Peter's disintegration period. The changes in appearance were only external manifestations of the internal revolution. Bald Gabriel presented simple rock songs, but this transitional stage could not last forever. The time was coming to build a new incarnation, a new creation.
If the late 1970s had been all about reclaiming the creative battleground, playing the instruments fast and loose and throwing out the prog era's overblown productions, the 1980s started fresh. New Wave had established itself, moving towards the rise of independent labels such as Rough Trade and Factory, with bands such as The Smiths and New Order.
In preparation for recording his 3rd album, Gabriel bought a farm near his home in Bath, where he created a simple, mobile recording studio in a few weeks. He installed all his equipment there, connected a 4-track tape recorder for recording, and became self-sufficient. Problems with professional studio fees and the annoying clock, which can make life miserable for any artist, reminding them of the business aspect of their activity, disappeared forever. For Peter, who had long enjoyed long, meticulous work on songs and sounds, his own studio turned out to be heaven on earth. However, this was only the beginning of the road to success. Above all, his own studio opened the gates to experiments and searching for original solutions, both in the sphere of communication of songs and sound. Therefore, the entire recording session of the 3rd album was conducted in the context of experiments. In the beginning of 1979, Gabriel started to look for musicians he could rehearse and form a band with for his 3rd album.
Peter couldn't count on his rhythm section being in the studio all the time. Murata and Levin had other commitments at the time and couldn't be a full-time contributor to the 3rd album. John Giblin played most of the bass, and Phil Collins often played drums.
So Gabriel, his manager Gail Coulson, and Tony Stratton Smith went to see a band random hold at the Rock Garden in Covent Garden. Gabriel was impressed by the band and wanted Gail to manage them and Strat to sign them to Charisma. Gabriel asked Random Hold to go to Beth to rehearse with him.
It was pouring with rain when we got to the house, and we couldn't find him anywhere. Then we heard some people making noises around the side of the barn, and there were 3 people covered with mud. The barn had been flooded, and Peter had been helping with a few of the road crew to dig a channel to divert the water. He was wearing a pullover and Wellington and an old school cap,
said David Rhodes. After some time, it became clear that Gabriel was mainly interested in David Rhodes, who later went down on his own for 3 weeks of rehearsals. David Rhodes was the group's singer, songwriter, and aspiring guitarist.
Technically, I could barely play, but I used to make some nice noises,
said Rhodes.
He needed a producer willing to experiment in a similar way. Gabriel was impressed by the feel of Susie and the Banshees records. They were produced by 24-year-old Steve Lillywhite, whose hit production included the Mombers, Susie and the Banshees, and XTC. When Lillywhite got a call from Golly Coulson to arrange a meeting with Gabriel, he thought it was one of the mates phoning up as a joke. Before the start of recordings, Peter and Steve Lillywhite established only one rule.
If something sounded normal, it shouldn't be used. That was the basic thing we reminded ourselves of all through the LP, which really helped me up,
said Lillywhite.
It was great for me because I was experimenting with a lot of different dimensions of sound,
Peter said. Since the split with Genesis, Gabriel had maintained sporadic contact with the group, mainly through sharing the same offices. He was friendliest with Phil Collins.
Pete wanted to rehearse some songs for his new album, and I heard from Gail that he didn't have a band because he could not afford to keep them on a constant paycheck,
said Collins.
I said, "Look, if he wants a drummer, I will be there anytime he wants."
Later, Peter rang up and said,
"That would be great. Come down to Bath."
Recordings.
Recording for the album started in summer 1979 using a mobile at Ashcombe House. And then mixing and overdubbing was done at Virginia Records Townhouse Studios in Shepherd's Bush, where Pagem was a house engineer. Studio 2, where Gabriel was to record, had stone walls that made the sound splashy. The studio exaggerated the resonance of the cymbals. Pagem and Lillywhite had countered this before by distancing the microphones away from the drums, a technique Gabriel also used in his own studio. Gabriel writing was changing, developing rhythms first instead of chords and melodies. It was a crucial change that helped shape his future success and was spurred on by a breakthrough in technology. Larry Fast got him the first programmable drum machine, a little rhythm box called Pi, made by friends of his in Oklahoma City. The first song written with the help of the rhythm machine was I Don't Remember.
During the recordings,
Pete suddenly announced that he didn't like cymbals and hi-hat because they were too normal. Phil Collins became very disorientated. They took away his cymbals and his break, making him hit empty space out of habit. It was strange to him that he couldn't stop himself from raising his hand with the stick as if to hit a cymbal. This album was the first time that I had a chance to work with Kate Bush, who was singing on Games Without Frontiers. I'd heard Wuthering Heights, which I really liked. I thought she had an extraordinary, wonderful voice and was doing great things as a writer. Then obviously I went on to work with her again in the future on Don't Give Up. The new ideas on the third album don't end with Gabriel's use of the gated reverb technique on Intruder and the African rhythm on Biko. No Self-Control features the marimba, an African and South American instrument similar to the xylophone. Gabriel broke new technological ground as the first person to use the Fairlight CMI, computerized musical instrument, synthesizer in a British recording studio. Guitarist Sid McGuinness, who was on Peter's second American tour, also attended Carly Simon's recording session at New York's Power Station Studios. It was then that the Australian co-inventor of the Fairlight, Peter Vogel, was showing his wares there. The instrument's name comes from the name of a hydrofoil that plied Sydney Harbor. It was thanks to Sid that Gabriel first heard about this invention and spoke about it in this way. For me, it was a dream come true, because I had pictured in my head something that would just allow you to go around with a microphone and grab anything and start manipulating it and being able to use it in your pulp.
Computers are starting to play a big part in music. Artists like Human League, Pete Townsend, and Peter Gabriel have been using a new instrument in the studio, and here Peter Gabriel explains.
We're working with a Fairlight CMI on this one, which is a computer where you can record any natural sound, any sound you like. And this, we went to scrapyards, got metal sounds, exhaust pipes, paving stones, as well as a lot of instruments. Feed this into the computer, manipulate it on a TV screen with a light pen, changing the waveform if you want, and reversing bits and pieces and adding other instruments, and then sending it back to a keyboard so you can build up rhythms and melodies with it. But it means, at the moment they're absurdly expensive, but soon when a lot of companies are doing them and they're add-ons to the home computer, I think it's going to really open things up so that anyone who wants to make music can work with a huge range of sounds, and this, I think, is very exciting.
I can't imagine a garage band with the Fairlight kind of an instrument.
Well, there'll be cheaper versions of that, and I think there'll be many garage bands in 5 years or maybe 10 years from now that work with these things because of the possibilities with sound. I'm certain the third world is going to have an increasing influence on our culture, and in music, a very vigorous hybrid will be produced, which is based on this non-European influence and the new technology, which is going to get very, very cheap. And this facility will open up a new age of electronic skiffle.
Well, hi there. Yeah. See, if I pick up this mic, for an example, and press S for sample, we can put in the sound, I hope. Mummy! Over here we have Mummy, the waveform, and it should be up on the keyboard. to use the Fairlight to give me some of the unusual soundscapes with which I'm going to try and make this record different. On toe windscreen, take one. 1, 2, 3, 4. TV smash, take one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Take two. Bit more force. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just the wind in the pipe is quite nice. Yeah. Where are we, 7 or something?
Oh, get this bastard!
1, 2, 3, 4.
I think we did it!
Oh, it looks good. Yeah, all the sounds on this thing are stored on these floppy disks, and some of these are supplied with the machine. This has a list of all the different sounds available on this floppy disk. So I pull out my phallic symbol here and point it at the appropriate noise. Say this is Pet Swan, which is a modified Swanee whistle. There's a repeat built into it. And the rhythm of the repeat is something which really, really excited me, and I've written a song around the rhythms. So there, I was thinking of a rhythm that would go against it. Dum 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 ba bum ba bum dum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum 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 bum. At this point, I've only got outline ideas for lyrics. So I use odd sounds and noises from the voice, which I call Gabrielese. I think often that the naked sound of the voice is more emotive without lyrics, and I intend for there to be less lyrics on this album.
You have to have the right attitude working with Peter rather than technical ability, said Lillywhite. All this breaking of artistic sound barriers was the last thing Gabriel's American record company Atlantic wanted, if it meant being uncommercial.
During the recording, the musicians had to put up with the visits of Atlantic's head of A&R, Bet Californian John Kolodner. After the Townhouse sessions, the bulk of the album was recorded at Ashkma using the Manor Mobile Studio. It was the first recording Gabriel had made on home territory. Kolodner went to hear what was going on.
His big thing in music was fuck art. The best record in the world is the one that sells the most. End of the story. And he used to come over occasionally during the album and hum and ha, said Lillywhite.
We were very childish in a way. And when we know Kolodner was coming over, we'd make sure the control room in the studio was really cold because we knew he liked it warm. And we used to have table tennis tournaments during the recording of the album.
We would think we had something really good going, and we would come in and put a damper on it. Everyone was nice to him. There was never any animosity. Kolodner's most memorable remark came while he was listening to it through the wire. I was in the studio when Kolodner said, if you do this, this, and this, it will sound like the Doobie Brother. I had enough. I walked out of the studio, remembered Gail Coulson. Paul Weller's guitar was used as a suitable antidote.
Nice here with a view trees. Eating with a spoon, they don't give you knives. Expect you watch those trees blowing in the breeze. We want to see you lead a normal life.
Gated reverb sound.
In 1979, Phil Collins was in the studio recording drums for Peter Gabriel's song Intruder with producer Hugh Padgham. Padgham accidentally left the talkback mic on, and it picked up Collins' drums with a compressed gated reverb effect.
We used to call it the face hugger sound. You know the movie Alien where this thing comes out?
Gabriel loved it, and Collins took that sound with him. Soon, the sound spread, shaping iconic hits like
Put on your red shoes and dance the blues.
that accidental discovery became synonymous with 80s music.
This is just a shortened version of this topic. It's time for a detailed description of the entire event.
But what is gated reverb sound effect? What does it involve from a technical perspective? On this matter, we'd best let Phil Collins explain it to us.
If you put a compressor on a sound, like instead of if you hit a snare drum, if you hit if you put a compressor on it, it will last longer. It will go because you're making it, you're compressing it and then letting it open up, so you'll get the room sound. You'll get the person breathing. If you put a noise gate on that and cut it off, you'll get because you've got a gate cutting the compression off. Now you can adjust those so that the gate shuts earlier or later or whatever. So you can get a which is the gate cutting it off. The compressor makes it longer, the sound longer, and then the gate cuts it off. So you get quite a sharp edge to the sound, a sharp ending edge, you know. So if you get as opposed to so what people have to remember, I had headphones on, and while he was doing this with the noise gates and the compressors, I was playing. Okay. So you make a rhythm, you compose a rhythm and a tempo for that rhythm with the sound that you're hearing in the headphones, which is being changed by someone doing this. Once he's got it, he won't change it. So that's how we arrived at and so I played this.
Now let us delve into the memories of those who were directly involved in making this extremely important musical discovery. Collins was fooling around on his kit trying to develop a drum pattern for Margarita, a song destined never to be released. As Collins was playing away, he became aware of the effect he was creating via a cheap microphone.
The sound he heard went through a gate compressor unit, the first of its kind fitted to the studio's new solid-state logic desk. The gate compressor unit both shut off the sound and squashed it. Lillywhite and Padgham were experimenting with these devices. For some reason I had this thing in and Phil was playing, said Padgham. And then Hugh started playing with it. Pete was in the control room and he suddenly heard it and he said, "Fucking hell, listen to that." And we said, "Yes, that's amazing." It was something we had never heard before, not at anybody else. It was an enormous sound because we were compressing the depth out of this microphone and it wasn't what it was supposed to be used for. So Pete said to Phil, "Play along for 5 minutes." So Phil just sat there and played for 5 or 10 minutes. And Pete said, "Thank you very much. I'll go home and write a song to that." Gabriel decided to use the drum sound not for Margarita but instead for another track. That drum sound opens Gabriel's third album, On Intruder. The technique became known as the gated reverb. The reverb came from the reverberation in the studio, a sound that can be imitated electronically, and the gate from the cutoff device on the control desk. Phil Collins was inspired by the sound he helped develop on Intruder and used the gate reverb extensively on his own album Face Value, recorded in the same studio with Hugh Padgham as co-producer and engineer. It featured on the song In the Air Tonight. His first major solo hit, Collins ultimately got more recognition for creating that sound than Gabriel. It's Silly Really. At the time I was pissed off because Phil's album was an enormous seller, and then people would say to me, "Oh, you are copying the Phil Collins sound," said Gabriel. Collins saw all this slightly differently. That was one of the best examples of Pete's blood-mindedness. He didn't want any metal on the album, so I said, "Why? Some sounds would sound great like that, but others would be great with metal." He said, "No, I don't want any metal." So I said, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Instead of hitting a cymbal, you hit the drum." I started playing this drum sound, and Pete straight away put his hand on the intercom and said, "Listen, that sounds great. Play that for 10 minutes. At the end of it, I said to Pete, "If you're not going to use that, I would like that." Because as far as I was concerned, I had written this drum part, and I said I'd like to use it. So I took a tape away with me that night. I took it to mean, okay, you can use it if you want. And here the whole Pandora's box opens. Did I rob Peter by using this sound since it was mine? In my opinion, I used something of my own, and I will defend it until the last hour. It was my idea. I played the part, and thanks to Hugh's tricks, the sound appeared. I'm not saying that it's all my doing, but I also don't agree that Pete did it all. You see how complicated it is. Later I found out that Peter had a song called Intruder, and that he arranged it to use as backing on the drums. So I asked Dale to ask Peter if he could mention my participation on the record, because I felt that there was something of mine there. Pete wrote on the record, Intruder. Composition, Peter Gabriel. Drum part, Phil Collins, which is exactly what I wanted. When my album Face Value came out, of course everyone said it was very Gabrielian, and I think they meant the sound of my drums on his album. Well, you only have to listen to Intruder and In the Air Tonight, or the rest of the drums on my album to see that it's something completely different. Of course, when my album Face Value came out, everyone said it was very Gabriel-esque, and I didn't think any of it was apart from the drum sound which I had used on Pete's album. If you listen to Intruder and The Air Tonight and all the other drum parts I have done, they are all very different. Phil was not making that idea, said Padgham, who as well as co-producing Face Value also went on to produce Genesis. He was just impressed with an engineer's ability to create new sounds, his enthusiasm, and everything else. Phil had never heard his drums sound like that before. Later, when I spoke to Neil Rogers, he told me that as soon as he heard my message, I thought, I've got to do something like that. I think Gabriel's third album was the starting point for a new kind of sound, says Steve Lillywhite. Now it's become so commonplace that I'm not interested anymore. Lillywhite finds it interesting how Gabriel and Collins work together.
they're complete opposites. Phil will say, let's get to work. This is how we do it. And Peter will say, let's get to work. What are we going to do, or how do we do it? Phil doesn't have any problems. Peter has hundreds of them, and each one leads to solving hundreds of them.
Songs. Side 1, Track 1. Composer, Peter Gabriel. Duration of the song, 4 minutes and 54 seconds. Title of the song, Intruder.
Rock music folklore is littered with studio happiness that only add to its fabulous historic tapestry. One is the unexpected appearance in the studio of a fat, bald, and unrecognizable Syd Barrett, while Pink Floyd were recording Shine on Your Crazy Diamond, and we all know the apocryphal story of Paul McCartney waking one morning having a dreamt the tune for Yesterday, just as we all know the story of the gated reverb drum sound discovered, rather than created, by engineer Hugh Padgham and drummer Phil Collins, while he was playing around with drum patterns for an unfinished song called Marguerite. Working through the solid-state Logic mixing desk, the gate compressor simultaneously shut off and squashed the sound. It would prove to be groundbreaking and, after Phil Collins employed the same technique from the drum break on In the Air Tonight, it came to define the 1980s and can be heard throughout the decade on recordings such as Power Station's Some Like It Hot, Kate Bush's Hounds of Love, Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA, and countless more. Incidentally, having been rediscovered by a whole new generation, it's on its way back to a speaker near you. Thus we have Intruder, a truly menacing and urgent piece of music coupled with the equally menacing subject of a burglar breaking into a house with the resident asleep upstairs. It is told from the perspective of the intruder, who likes to feel the suspense when I'm certain you know I am there. I like you lying awake, your bated breath charging the air. It creaks and pulses with electric anticipation for confrontation or worse, and that very real sense of dread is helped along by some unorthodox instrumentation, such as a xylophone solo midway through the song and even the sounds of a glass cutter scraping against a surface, which keeps the listener on edge for every second of the song's nearly 5-minute running time. This is chilling. As Gabriel said when discussing the song, there's part of me in that, but there's also a rape metaphor. It's definitely dark but real. It was a ballsy opening to the album and set the bar high for what was to come.
Touch and the smell of all the pretty dresses you wear. Intruders happy in the
Side 1, Track 2. Composer, Peter Gabriel. Duration of the song, 3 minutes and 55 seconds. Title of the song, No Self-Control.
some food. I'm so hungry all the time. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to stop.
This continues the mood and feel of the opening track and features, for the first time on a Peter Gabriel record, backing vocals by Kate Bush, whose own experiments in sound and rhythm matched Gabriel's. The song itself has more dark subject, this time schizophrenia and paranoia. It opens with a Robert Fripp guitar loop before Morris Pert's xylophone takes over. Gabriel's insistence that no metal be used on the album means that Phil Collins' drumming here, without the splash of cymbals, really sounds strange and unfamiliar. In its use of the marimba, the song was partially inspired by Steve Reich's minimalist work, Music for 18 Musicians, and further shows how Gabriel was reaching out beyond the confines of rock music to find inspiration. Those attending the tour for the previous album would have heard a version of this song performed under the working title, I Don't Know How to Stop. Following on from the successful lead single, Games Without Frontiers, this performed less well, and despite being included on the BBC's Top of the Pop in May 1980, it peaked at number 33 in the UK chart.
Side 1, Track 3, Composer, Peter Gabriel. Duration of the song, 1 minute and 21 seconds. Title of the song, Start.
"81 seconds of friendly respite. This feels like it belongs on Vangelis' soundtrack to Ridley Scott's dystopian film, Blade Runner. Dick Morrissey's mellow saxophone, played extemporaneously over Gabriel's synth, is simply beautiful, a delicate flower in an industrial landscape and a soothing instrumental interlude between the schizophrenic No Self-Control and the discord of I Don't Remember.
Side 1, Track 3, Composer, Peter Gabriel. Duration of the song, 4 minutes and 41 seconds. Title of the song, I Don't Remember.
A fairly straightforward rock song, running along the familiar Gabriel themes of fear and despair, is here transformed into something quite remarkable through the exploitation of the newly available technology. Continuing his experiments with sound that are across this album, Gabriel recorded the smashing of milk bottles and banging together of bricks before sampling them into a Fairlight CMI synthesizer. This album was one of the first to use one. Although most of the tracks had already been laid down, the Fairlight was able to create an overall feeling that listeners were hearing something totally new for a rock album. To hear it for the first time at the dawn of the new decade must have been like breaking out of East Berlin and discovering the brave new world of the West. Just when you are settled into the track's driving rhythm, at 3:48, it suddenly slows to a stop as if your turntable belt has broken. It's a neat twist on the traditional fade-out. Gabriel was so taken with the possibilities of the Fairlight that he set up Psychosystems to import and distribute the Fairlight in the UK, showing that he had a canny head for business.
Strange is your language, I have no decoder. Why don't you make your...
Side 1, Track 5, Composer, Peter Gabriel. Duration of the song, 4 minutes and 28 seconds. Title of the song, Family Snapshot.
Is news. Today is different. Today is not the same. Today I'll make the action. Take snapshot into the light.
There is a common misconception that this song, probably Gabriel's best realized narrative song, is about the assassination of President Kennedy in Dallas, 1963. I even know English teachers who have used it as such, but it's not. The actual inspiration was the 1973 attempt on the life of U.S. Alabama Governor Wallace, by the fame-seeking Arthur Bremer. The shooting left Wallace paralyzed. Gabriel was moved to writing about it after reading Bremer's account in An Assassin's Diary, which Gabriel described as a really nasty book, but to get a sense of the person who was writing it, Bremer was obsessed with the idea of fame. He was aware of the news broadcasts all over the world and was trying to time the assassination to hit the early evening news in the States, and the late night in Europe, to get maximum coverage. It's a chilling song about the thirst for infamy and more than just Warhol's 15 minutes of fame and being forever linked to a public figure through violent murder. In just over 6 months, a similar scenario would grab the headlines across the world with the murder of ex-Beatles, John Lennon, by a fan, Mark Chapman, outside Lennon's Dakota Building home in New York. A similar situation would play out in 1981 when John Hinckley made an attempt on the life of President Reagan. Reagan's would-be assassin had acted in order to win the favor of actress Jodie Foster, with whom he was besotted. The song itself is a measured piece, along similar lines to Home Sweet Home on Scratch, in that we become involved in the subjective narrative because of the first-person perspective. It starts off slow, and as the target gets closer, the music picks up before returning to a reflective quiet once the deed is done. With the would-be assassin recalling his childhood, the narrator finds a symbiosis between the life of his intended victim and his own, recalling a family photograph, the title snapshot, a happy moment in an otherwise unhappy childhood. I had been here before. Lonely boy hiding behind the front door. I'm growing up sad, I need some attention. As stated above, the song is not about the Kennedy assassination, an event that truly shocked the world. As Gabriel said on stage in Seattle in 1983, there are a few images of Dallas 20 years ago that bring the event to mind, not least the references to the cavalcade moving on. It's another one of Gabriel's tales of isolation and alienation that run through the album, and was the first time he used the Yamaha CP70 electric grand piano.
Side 1, Track 6, Composer, Peter Gabriel. Duration of the song, 5 minutes. Title of the song, And Through the Wire.
Continuing Gabriel's fascination with shortwave radio and of the alienated outsider, this song brings the idea of long-distance desire for human contact and connection. Gabriel's yearning vocal carries the menacing undertones of intruder. This could be a stalker just as easily as a long-distance lover, especially the possessive refrain of I want you. The opening 3 piano notes, repeated 4 times, are like drops of ice, immediately lending this song about desire, a cold, chilling feel, before Gabriel enters directly with the chorus, and through the wire I hear your voice, and through the wire I touch the power, and through the wire I see your face. It's through the wire. It's another subjective narrative. In keeping with the soundscapes employed throughout, this could well be a song about separation in a divided city, such as Cast and West Berlin at the height of the Cold War. We get so strange across the border, and as such the wire of the title could serve not only as radio wire but as the rolls of barbed wire that ran across the wall or over no man's land like grotesque tumbleweed. There are elements of David Bowie's Berlin trilogy woven in here, and Paul Weller's intense guitar style considered ideal for the track, which was just as well, as he was recording with new wave mod darlings. The Jam in an adjoining studio at Townhouse, and so was able to put his own stamp on the recordings. XTC guitarist David Gregory also appears on the album Gabriel in Effect, giving his approval of contemporary acts. As the song fades out, Gabriel's vocal becomes distorted before the song ends suddenly, as if the door has been shut on an empty industrial warehouse.
Side 2, Track 1, Composer, Peter Gabriel. Duration of the song, 4 minutes and 6 seconds. Title of the song, Games Without Frontiers.
It's a simple enough idea that opens side to instead of countries going to war and suffering unfold casualties. World leaders play war games to determine the outcome of an international disagreement. One finds this often enough in dystopian science fiction. A similar video game concept served as an on-screen duel between Sean Connery's James Bond and Klaus Maria Brandauer's Largo and Never Say Never Again. In England at the time, there was a popular television game show titled It's a Knockout, which featured opposing teams from different UK regions involved in a variety of obstacle courses. A school sports day, if you will. What made it different and entertaining was the participants dressing in all manner of outlandish and wholly impractical foam rubber suits that hindered their progress over the courses. This ranged from giant penguins with limited visibility, wizards with outsized footwear, chefs with massive trousers and tocks, and all manner of jungle creatures, all lumbering through the games with varying degrees of incompetence. This visual slapstick was topped off with the energetic commentary of Stuart Hall, who was routinely left speechless with laughter. This was, in turn, an anglicized version of a European show, entitled GAUX Sans Frontiers, Games Without Borders, formerly Intervilles. This show was, unbelievably, the brainchild of the French president, Charles de Gaulle, who, having been a leading figure in the fight against the Nazi and World War II, saw the opportunity for French and German youth to take part in a series of games, thus promoting a healthy, cordial between the two countries. In Peter Gabriel's hands, what begins as a seemingly innocent children's song, where Hans plays with Lot plays with Jane, soon becomes schoolboy innuendo and behind the bike sheds games, as Jane plays with Willie is happy again. Eventually, the reel of the song becomes clear, as Gabriel uses the former of a zany game show to highlight just how silly war is, dressing up in costumes, playing silly games, be it the jungle wars of Vietnam, hiding out in treetops, shouting out rude names, or the Normandy landings, whistling tunes, we hide in the dunes by the seaside. Gabriel also shows his usual fondness for wordplays, using the phrase, "It's knockout," as the hook into the chorus. Plus, we have Kate Bush providing backing vocals, singing GAUX Sans Frontieres throughout. Chosen as the album's lead single, Games Without Frontiers was released on the 4th of February 1980, with B-side of I Don't Remember in the UK and Lead a Normal Life in the US, reaching number 4 in the UK chart. It would remain his most successful chart placing until Sledgehammer, 6 years later. To avoid the was changed on the single to the more radio-friendly, whistling tunes, We're Kissing Baboons in the Jungle.
What's the concept behind the song Games Without Frontiers?
The idea that perhaps adults seen as kids and countries behaving toward each other in a way that adults are unable to behave, so that i.e. through war, etc. Different set of moral codes.
Side 2, Track 2. Composer, Peter Gabriel. Duration of the song, 5 minutes and 22 seconds. Title of the song, Not One of Us. On an album full of fear, loathing, and experimental sounds, Not One of Us is probably the most straightforward song of the set, but not the opening, which has a vocal interpretation of a hunting horn often heard during fox hunts, before Robert Fripp's electric guitar and John Giblin's bass snap back and forth. This immediately feels like it belongs in the industrial sound than being explored by new wave artists such as Gary Newman and the Human League. This, coupled with Gabriel's almost painted chanting, creates a tapestry of isolation. But, in keeping with the line, looks are deceptive. Near the 1-minute mark, it settles into a familiar rock pattern. It's a song about not only the fear of the other, be that race or gender, and how there's safety in numbers when you learn to divide, but also the dangers of demonizing those who are different from the self, or, put plainly, us, by creating in-groups and stigmatizing them through creating perceived negative differences. But the lyric was open to misconception, that Gabriel was possibly promoting the hate mentality of Little England, perhaps not helped at the time by his shaven head, which was a little too close to the skinhead culture of the National Front. On the contrary, the lyrics, a foreign body and a foreign mind, never welcome in the land of the blind, were in fact a warning of the dangers of not having an open mind. It warned that your values are twisted. However, there was hope in the offer. Let us help you unwind. It's a song that brims with energy and an underlying feeling of menace and violence. Roger Waters had explored similar themes in the latter stages of Pink Floyd's The Wall. Side 2, Track 3. Composer, Peter Gabriel. Duration of the song, 4 minutes and 14 seconds. Title of the song, Lead a Normal Life. Here, the banal, normal life of conformity, played out through the simplest of tunes, just 9 piano notes accompanied by Morris Pert's repetitive xylophone. That could well be the follow-up to the warning of the previous albums, A Wonderful Day in a One-Way World, or a precursor to the equally minimalist We Do What We're Told, Milgram's 37, from So. The lyrics, spoken from a visitor's perspective, in a Mockney tone, to a patient incarcerated in a psychiatric facility, are spare and form a one-sided conversation of sorts. It's nice here with a view of the trees eating with a spoon. They don't give you knives. Spec you watch those trees blowing in the breeze. We want to see you lead a normal life. It's a haunting piece that creates a feeling of sitting with your back to an open door, while in keeping with the mood of isolation and anguish that permeates the album, a mood that Gabriel stated, in conversation with journalist Spencer Bright, was not intentional. Clearly, there was something in the air at the turn of the decade. Lead a Normal Life was about being in a mental hospital and the sense of isolation.
It's nice here with a view of the trees. Eating
Side 2, Track 4, Composer, Peter Gabriel. Duration of the song, 7 minutes and 32 seconds. Title of the song, Biko.
One song on Gabriel's third album was Biko, about Steve Biko, the black leader who died in a South African prison in 1977. It began with a chant sung at Biko's funeral. The song's emphasis on rhythm marked a significant development in Gabriel's music.
I began to think that the traditional rock rhythms were very limiting. But in the Biko song, I took a slow rhythm, which was a hypnotic pattern for me. It went dum 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 da, dum 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 da. And this was very good to work around, and I could set other rhythms against it. It provided a solid structure for me, and I think the rhythm is like the spine of a piece. If you change that, then the body that forms around it is changed as well. So the style of writing, which I was then attracted to put with it, was very different from what I would have done with a normal rock rhythm if that had come from a regular rock pattern on a rhythm box or rock drummer. I think a lot of rock rhythms are built up around 4 and a bar, and a lot of non-European work more on a pulse basis, and they perhaps have different instruments which are like pieces of a jigsaw which form a pattern, a whole, which an individual part cannot provide you with. So, and I think that the variation and the range is much more stimulating. In a lot of rock and disco, there's this very heavy, tight bass drum and backbeat from a snare, and this is the foundation for most of the music that you'd hear in a disco, for instance. And yet there are rhythms which are just as exciting to the body, but are just that create the same sort of responses, but are much more imaginative and open.
Biko is the one song that signposts the direction Peter Gabriel was to take, both musically and personally, over the next few years. Initially inspired by South African director Jamie Yu's 1964 film, Dingaka, and its soundtrack consisting predominantly of tribal song. Gabriel became aware of Steve Biko's death through the BBC's coverage of the event. But Gabriel was by no means the first to comment on the events in South Africa. Artists such as Steel Pulse, Tapa Zuki, and Gabriel's former label mate, Peter Hamill, had previously recorded such songs. But the event triggered Gabriel's interest in African and world music, an interest that was to continue into the next studio album and beyond. This is first and foremost a protest song with its roots in actual fact. the murder of anti-apartheid activist Bantu Stephen Biko while in police custody. The song opens and closes with audio taken from his funeral in King William's Town on the Eastern Cape of South Africa, specifically the songs Ngamla Sibio and Senzini Na. The majority of the song is driven by Phil Collins' steady two-tone rhythm played on a surdo, a Brazilian bass drum, and allows Gabriel's vocal to take an impassioned center stage. The synthesized bagpipe sound may seem anachronistic in a song about South Africa, until you realize that, as Larry Fast points out, the 1st and the 2nd Battalion Royal Scots were, in numerous military actions, played into battle by their traditional pipers. The underpinnings of apartheid had bagpipes. The historical accuracy was preserved, and the sound became a sonic signature in the song. The song starts with the facts, almost like a radio news report. September 77, Port Elizabeth. Weather fine, it was business as usual in Police Room 6. 1. 9. The lyric moves to sentiments of pain and anguish. When I try to sleep at night, I can only dream in red. The outside world is black-white with only one color, dead. Before evoking a rising protest and a wind of change, you can blow out a candle, but you can't blow out a fire. Once the flames begin to catch, the wind will blow in higher. Among the English lyrics is the repeated Xhosa phrase, Yila Moya, which in Zulu means come spirit, which many have taken as being a call to arms against the South African regime. The hypnotic trance-like rhythm comes to an end as the mourners at Biko's funeral return before their voices are violently cut off by a final and dramatic double drum strike that is intended to resemble gunshots. On the day of recording this song, Peter came across tapes of Stephen Biko's funeral and added the actual funeral songs to the beginning and end of his song. The song not only helped with a greater Western awareness of the horror and injustice of the South African apartheid system, which was to reach its apotheosis with the eventual release of Nelson Mandela and fall of apartheid in 1990, but also lead to Gabriel's own involvement with the human rights organization Amnesty International, touring with both A Conspiracy of Hope in 1986 and Human Rights now 2 years later. Biko became a very important song for me. I'd not written an overtly political song before and was wondering if it would be accepted. I had various doubts in Tom Robinson, who I got to know at the time, who was championing various causes, but the gay cause is what he was most identified with at the time, was really telling me that I should just steam ahead and do it anyway and put it out, and that it didn't matter really what people thought of my motives, if it got attention and money in the right direction. That, I think, put my mind at rest, and later on I think it led me towards some of the human rights stuff, which I'm still very much involved with today. So it was as much a thing that helped shape me as the other way around. Cover.
As with the previous two albums, the design was the work of album cover maestro Storm Thorgerson and Hypnosis.
For the entirety of the 1970s, a small design company from London were responsible for over 200 of history's most iconic record covers. They worked with Led Zeppelin, Paul McCartney, AC/DC, and a countless amount of others. They were even responsible for Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. They changed album design art forever, but for some reason in 1982 they dissolved. In 1969, Pink Floyd's Ummagumma. 1970, Pink Floyd's Atom Heart Mother. In 1971, they designed around 14 albums, including Electric Warrior by T-Rex and ELO's self-titled debut. In 1973, they had Dark Side of the Moon under their belt, and they exploded. Houses of the Holy by Zeppelin, Technical Ecstasy by Black Sabbath, Styx, Peter Gabriel, The Police, Paul McCartney, Def Leppard, and 10cc all wanted a piece. Yet after working on Led Zeppelin's Coda in 1982, Hypnosis were no more. It encourages the belief that there's something more at play, not unlike the Renaissance movements of the 14th to 17th centuries. We're delighted to have seen their making firsthand before these stories inevitably turn into rumour and myth. Everything plays its part. Hypnosis were originally Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell from Cambridge in the UK, and later they were joined by throbbing Gristle band member Peter Christopherson. Though the Holy Trio did dissolve in 1982, and many believed them to have stopped their work, that's not quite the truth. Every member of Hypnosis continued to work creatively in the music industry. Thorgerson headed his own studios, Christopherson directed over 40 music videos, and Powell, the group's last living member, remained the go-to creative director for Pink Floyd and the guitarist David Gilmour. This is a legacy that, sure, you can count with numbers, record sales, album covers, years active, but it's bigger than that. Hypnosis saw the world moving and had the audacity to nudge it in the right direction. They changed album cover art forever. And how many designers can make that claim?
The singles covers followed similar design patterns, but this was the last time the pair would collaborate on album artwork. Storm Thorgerson, from Hypnosis, introduced Peter to the work that Les Crims was doing with Polaroids. They began experimenting with hundreds of Polaroids, having fun squashing and squeezing and smearing the developing images, a technique later known as crimsography. The unsettling yet startling results were then rephotographed with black and white film.
We did the sleeve with Storm again at Hypnosis, and he introduced me to these things called crimsographs. There was a photographer called Les Crims who discovered that if you take a Polaroid and you squash it, you can get the colors to run. There's a whole book, quite a little subsection of photography, devoted to the art of squashing Polaroids. And on this session we did many pictures with the Polaroid, and everyone was squashing them. We probably had about 300 different squashed Polaroids, and we used to go after them with different objects, burnt matches, coins, fingers, and all sorts of things. It was a lot of fun because you had to get the timing right, but you got some wonderful effects out of the distortions. We have a poster with all the different failures, or the ones that we didn't use, which was a good piece of work.
The cover for the vinyl album was in black and white. This is the color Polaroid from which it was taken, without further adornment. In later years we came to prefer it.
Storm Thorgerson discussing the fine art print of the album cover.
I'd had a dream of a melting face, some kind of wax effigy caught possibly in a museum fire. To achieve the painterly dripping effect we used ordinary Polaroids, after Les Crims, and if one pushes around the developing picture sandwiched between two bits of plastic with a blunt instrument like the end of a pencil, the image is then smeared as it develops. Since this procedure is dead easy, we did it loads of times along with Pete Gabriel and disfiguring himself by manipulating Polaroids as they developed. Peter impressed us greatly with his ability to appear in an unflattering way, preferring the theatrical or artistic to the cosmetic. Because we couldn't decide on a favorite, for they were all great fun, we used lots.
Storm Thorgerson.
Ein Deutsches Album.
Hans spielt mit Lotte, Lotte spielt mit Joe, Jane spielt mit Willi, Willi ist wieder froh.
Gabriel took the unusual decision of recording a German-language version of the album, something not done by a popular English artist since the Beatles recorded Komm, Gib mir dein Hand, I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Come to me, come give me deine Hand, come give me deine Hand, come give me deine Hand, und du bist so schön. Bis auf die Fratzen im Dschungel und durch den
Here are the musicians who took part in the recording of the German version of the album Peter Gabriel 3 Melt, the German title of the album Ein Deutsches Album.
Peter Gabriel,
vocals, piano, synthesizer, percussion. Kate Bush, backing vocals on No Self-Control and Games Without Frontiers, and uncredited vocals on I Don't Remember. Jerry Murata, drums, percussion. Larry Fast, synthesizer. Robert Fripp, guitar on I Don't Remember, and Not One of Us.
John Giblin, bass. Dave Gregory, guitar. Tony Levaney Chapman, stick on I Don't Remember.
Phil Collins, drums on Intruder, and No Self-Control, snare drum on Family, Snapshot, Surdo on Biko.
Dick Morrissey, saxophone. Morris Purty, C percussion.
David Rhodes, guitars, backing vocals. Paul Weller, guitar on And Through the Wire. Dave Ferguson, vocals on Biko. The release was mostly a vocal overdub of its corresponding English language version. Ein Deutsches album was released shortly after the English language version, in June 2nd, 1980. Peter worked carefully with Horst Königstein to make sure the German language lyrics were more than simple translations from the originals. The language not only conveys the meaning and intended imagery of each song, but also allows the words to contribute to the musicality of the record. In May 1980, Peter wrote liner notes for the album, which have been adapted for the quotes that follow. For me, languages were never a barrier in rock music. When I first went on tour, it was strange to me that the English and American musicians did the same live show in all countries. They did not care about the national differences or the language of their audience. This attitude I found arrogant. The assertion that rock and English belong together is complete nonsense. You can express ideas and emotions in every language, and with some effort, one can work out the peculiarities of each language and use them musically. For some time, I have been trying to sing some songs in the language of my audience. That was me and my teddy bear in German and French on the last European tour. Although it was far from perfect, I had the feeling that my audience was excited about this gesture.
Es ist die falsche Seite. Ich geh den alten Weg, die Schlucht der hohlen, schrillen Töne.
I want to convince the record company that I would like to sing in other languages in order to be understood. In the end, the German company was the only one to show any interest in the idea. Thomas Quast was very enthusiastic, and he immediately sought a translator for me, and I was lucky to have him recommend Horst Königstein. We met in London in January and checked each other out to see if our heads were in the same place. We really liked each other and began working on the lyrics on the spot. First by singing the songs, discussing what was going on, which images are correct, which are not, etc. Horst's careful translations are a decisive contribution to this record. Horst had to work hard on my pronunciation until he could get a touch of the old Marlene. Particularly difficult with the US and RS. Horst's recommendation was to freeze my mouth into a grin. Nevertheless, I believe that my difficulties with language make it possible for me to approach the whole with a certain impartiality and naivete. This journey was particularly interesting because I was able to use language as a sound repertoire. Sounds as a means for expression and not just meaning. For example, I could take language cliches like Ordnung or alarm and sing them naively.
Träume, bald ist nichts mehr.
I think it's worth devoting a few words to Horst Königstein who seems to have been an important figure at this stage of Gabriel's career. Besides being an excellent translator, he also proved to be an excellent colleague. So, who was Horst Königstein? He was born in 1945 and died in 2013, began a professional career at Radio Bremen in the late 1960s, and soon moved to NDR television. He worked there as a director, scriptwriter, and producer, often combining documentary and stage docudrama. Above all, he shows popular and trivial culture again and again as a mirror of the times, with a visibly great desire for subjects, according to NDR. From 1990, Königstein was also a professor at the Academy of Media Arts in Cologne. In Haus Vaterland means something like House Homeland. From 1984, he had Peter Gabriel perform Jetzt kommt die Flood on the piano, and in the two-part Reichshauptstadt. Privat 1987, Gabriel even performed an unreleased cover version of Illusions. Note, there are several versions of this film. Unfortunately, the DVD does not include the performance. For Ein Deutsches album, Gabriel acted as producer and was assisted by sound engineers Colin Green and David Lord. In the original, these positions were held by Steve Lillywhite and Hugh Padgham. The record was released with a lyric sheet and liner notes by Gabriel explaining the making of the album. In addition to the songs on the album, another song was sung in German, and in this case also completely re-recorded. Jetzt kommt die Flood, Here Comes a Flood. It appeared as the B-side of the first single Spiel on Grenzen, but also on other single releases in non-German countries. Musically, this version has more similarities with the one on Robert Fripp's album Exposure and Gabriel's 1990 re-recording for Shaking the Tree. I sincerely hope that an independent German version of the album will foster an understanding of a musically complex album. But even if it does not work out, I must say that this experiment was very pleasing to me, and I learned a lot from it. Comparison of two albums.
Peter Gabriel 3, Melt.
And Ein Deutsches Album.
Wenn die Nacht der Himmel rot, das Radio.
Comparison of the instrumentation of both versions. Spiel ohne Grenzen. If we look at the music, we first notice that some songs have a different playing time than on the English version. Gabriel himself said that he had remixed 3 songs. However, there are minor differences in more than 3 songs, so it is not entirely clear which ones he meant here. Eindringling, Intruder, is about 10 seconds longer than in the English version because the whispered final part, Eindringling, Eindringling, is a little longer. Kein Selbstkontroll, No Self-Control, is also about 10 seconds longer than the original. Here the keyboards fade out a tiny bit later at the end. Start and I Don't Remember were combined into one song called Frag mich nicht immer, retranslated, Don't Always Ask Me, which is musically no different from the original version. Schnappschuss, Ein Familienfoto, Family Snapshot, is also identical. Und durch den Draht, and Through the Wire, on the other hand, fades out about 30 seconds earlier. No differences can be heard in Spiel ohne Grenzen, Games Without Frontiers. Du bist nicht wie wir, Not One of Us, on the other hand, is probably mixed quite slightly differently, with small deviations at the beginning and end of the song that extend it by about 15 seconds. Cover Biko, Ein normales Leben, Lead a Normal Life, is also 10 seconds longer, but this is simply due to additional silence at the end of the song. The most obvious deviation from the first version is recognizable on Biko, because for the German album they did not use the original album version, but the so-called remix version, which is included on some Biko 12 singles. It is easily recognizable because it starts with different vocals than the album version. It is also almost 90 seconds longer. The lyrics were translated by or with Horst Königstein. He only joined the project when the original English album was already finished and about to be released. However, the aim was not necessarily literal or meaningful translations. Instead, it was important to Gabriel that the mood and the images conveyed by the words should correspond to those of the English version and that they should additionally contribute to the musicality of the pieces. For Gabriel's understanding, the proposed German texts were each translated back into English word by word. The lyrics were translated by or with Horst Königstein. He only joined the project when the original English album was already finished and about to be released. However, the aim was not necessarily literal or meaningful translations. Instead, it was important to Gabriel that the mood and the images conveyed by the words should correspond to those of the English version and that they should additionally contribute to the musicality of the pieces. For Gabriel's understanding, the proposed German texts were each translated back into English word by word.
Lastig ins dunkle Wasser gleit, trink leer, träume, bald ist nichts.
Comparison of the text of both versions. German magazine Der Spiegel came to this conclusion. The effort to jump over the language barrier seems bizarre because the text cannot always be understood exactly. Here, the sometimes awkward pronunciation of Peter Gabriel was obviously a problem because acoustically the vocals are far in the foreground and very easy to understand. In fact, Gabriel's pronunciation on several songs is such that it distracts the German listener from the content and the music. For example, in Kein Selbstkontroll, where he sings, "When der Nebel sich het," the pronunciation of the word Nebel, fog, is far from being good. It's like you sing fag instead of fog in English, yet the wrong German pronunciation doesn't deliver a different meaning here. In Du bist nie, we were not one of us. One wonders what Augen are supposed to be. Bald schon geht es ihnen besser. Instead of bald schon geht es ihnen besser is from ein normales Leben. Apart from that, the content-related theme of some songs shifts due to the free translation. In Indringling, for example, there are clear sexual allusions in the text. Here, Königstein says that Gabriel explained to him that the English lyrics are about masturbation. Peter Gabriel mit Horst Königstein. Frag Michigan Nickhammer was given a less light, more depressive text. In several pieces, some lines simply make little sense. Besser mit dem Messer die Ladungslorgen. Better cut the line with a knife in Eindringling, Intruder, and Learjatst, Vorm Koffein Bread, etched empty in front of the head aboard, in Frag Michigan Nickhammer. If looks could kill, they probably will, was also translated in a rather unique way, using German colloquial language. Könnten Blicke töten, wird ihr flöten in Spiel ohne Grenzen. For Biko, the second and third verses were exchanged. Otherwise, the lyrics stick closest to the original. Here too, however, Du Lost nach ein Kurz, Doch nicht ein großes Feuer, does not exactly capture the meaning of you can blow out a candle, but you can't blow out a fire. Lost is more used for firefighting. No mention of blowing out a candle here. Durchdendraht is actually a cable or news wire, i.e. a journalistic news service. However, according to Horst Königstein, the song is about a sadomasochistic fantasy. In summary, Ein Deutsches album is definitely worth listening to, but it does not replace the English original. Also, some of the lyrics are not convincing and Gabriel's pronunciation is still in need of improvement. Although it was exactly in Gabriel's interest to use the language onomatopoeically, this did not always work out well. Nowadays, the record should therefore be interesting mainly for fans who listen carefully and want to compare both music and lyrics and let them have an effect on them. For the tour of the third album, Gabriel had planned to sing 5 songs in German.
In the end, he performed 4 to 5 songs from the album in German at the German concerts, depending on the location, plus We Do What We're Told, Milgram's 37, which remained unreleased for several years and was then called Where Ton Was Our Sack. Individual songs from the current record were also sung in English in Germany.
Singles. The promotion of Gabriel's third album was supported by singles.
Games Without Frontiers.
7-inch single vinyl was released on the 4th of February, 1980. Games Without Frontiers was the first single to be taken from Peter's third solo album 3 months before the album. The single cover is a side-on color image of Peter taken by Hypnosis, which, like the album that was to follow, utilizes the Les Crims-inspired method of manipulating a Polaroid picture from an SX-70 camera.
There was a photographer called Les Crims who discovered that if you take a Polaroid and you squash it, you can get the colors to run. And we used to go after them with different objects and sort of burnt matches and coins and fingers and all sorts of things. And it was a lot of fun because you had to get the timing right. But you got some wonderful effects out of the distortions,
said Peter Gabriel. The single first charted in the UK at number 48 on February 9, 1980, rising steadily over the next few weeks to a peak position at number 4. It stayed in the top 10 for 3 weeks and the UK top 75 for 11 weeks in total. In the USA, the single reached number 48 on the Hot 100 on September 20th, 1980 and remained on the chart for 11 weeks. The original video for the single was directed by David Mallet, but was updated under the direction of York Tillier for the Play DVD. The newer version of the video features extracts from the film's active site, Spiral and Grid by Michael Rovner, and additional video material by York Tillier, Dan Bloor, and Mark Besson. The track features Jerry Murata on drums and percussion, David Rhodes on guitar, Peter Gabriel on synth bass and whistles, Larry Fast on synth and synth bass, Kate Bush on backing vocals, Steve Lillywhite, whistles, Hugh Padgham, whistles. The single itself was released on 7 vinyl only in the UK and consists of 3 songs. 1, Games Without Frontiers, 2, The Start, 3, I Don't Remember. The single contains an alternate version of I Don't Remember, a song that was already being played live by Peter as early as 1978 that was produced by Peter and Steve Taylor. This version is available on the digital-only album Flotsam and Jetsam.
No Self-Control.
7-inch single vinyl was released on the 5th of May, 1980. The song was written by Peter Gabriel, produced by Steve Lillywhite, engineered by Hugh Padgham, and recorded at Ashcombe House near Bath, using the Manor Mobile, and at the Townhouse in London. The single cover is another image by Hypnosis that utilizes the Les Crims-inspired method of manipulating a Polaroid picture from an SX-70 camera. The single first charted in the UK on May 10, 1980, peaked at 33 and stayed in the UK top 75 for 6 weeks. No video was made for the song, though Peter did memorably perform it on Top of the Pops for the show broadcast on May 15, 1980. The single was only released on 7 vinyl and consists of 2 songs. 1, No Self-Control. 2, Lead a Normal Life.
Biko.
A single was released on the 18th of August, 1980. This single version of the song was written and produced by Peter, re-recorded and remixed at Crescent Studios in Bath and engineered by David Lord. Original tapes were engineered by Hugh Padgham and produced by Steve Lillywhite. The song features Jerry Marotta on drums, Phil Collins on surdo, David Rhodes on guitar, Larry Fast on bagpipes and synth, David Ferguson, screeches, Peter Gabriel on piano and drum pattern. The single cover contains information about Stephen Biko and Peter's rationale for releasing the song as a single. Text from the back cover is as follows.
Who?
Bantu Stephen Biko was a young South African leader who died in 1977 as a result of injuries received during interrogations by the South African Security Police. For further information, I would suggest the book Biko by Donald Woods on Penguin.
Why the song?
I believe Steve Biko was very important. He could have been a very positive force in Africa and a leader young people all over the world could have identified with. When I heard of Steve Biko's detention on the radio, I was sure that publicity would protect him. World attention had been attracted to the large number of prison suicides, slipping in showers, jumping from windows, and hanging. I was shocked one breakfast time to hear of his death and wrote down some thoughts in my diary, which were to be the start of the lyrics 2 years later.
Why put it out separately?
Some people have questioned the motive for putting this out as a 12 vinyl and a single when 2 other singles have been taken off the album. Firstly, I wanted the song to be available to anyone who did not want to spend the money on the album. Secondly, I would like to hear it on the radio. And thirdly, since recording it in another language, I have approached the mix differently and want to have an alternative versions accessible in English. The vocal track has been re-recorded and the track remixed.
Shashaloza.
Shashaloza, Go in Peace, was on the tracks off the soundtrack LP Dingaka that inspired the direction for the music of the song Biko. The original is an unaccompanied chant to which I have added an arrangement and a new rhythmic section of the song. There was no video made for the song at the time of this original single release, but one was made later on when the song was re-released to coincide with the movie Cry Freedom.
Oh, Biko.
Cry Freedom is a 1987 epic biographical drama film directed and produced by Richard Attenborough, set in late 1970s apartheid-era South Africa. The screenplay was written by John Briley based on a pair of books by journalist Donald Woods. The film centers on the real-life events involving South African activist Steve Biko and his friend Woods, who initially finds him too radical and attempts to understand his way of life. Denzel Washington stars as Biko, while Kevin Kline portrays Woods. Penelope Wilton co-stars as Woods' wife Wendy. Cry Freedom delves into the ideas of racism, segregation, disenfranchisement, socioeconomic inequality, political corruption, and the repercussions of violence. The single first charted in the UK on August 23, 1980, peaked at 38 and stayed in the UK top 75 for 3 weeks. The versions of Biko and Shashaloza that feature on this single release are available on the digital-only album Flotsam and Jetsam. There are also German versions of both Peter's third and fourth solo albums. The single was released on 7 and 12 vinyl. 7-inch single vinyl CB 370, 1, Biko, 2, Shashaloza. 7-inch single vinyl CB 370-12.
1 Biko, 2 Shashaloza, 3. Jetzt kommt die Flut.
Auf den Klippen siehst du töchte und erwachsene Sonne.
Spiel ohne Grenze.
7-inch single vinyl was released in February 1980. The single consists of 2 songs.
Spiel ohne Grenzen. Jetzt kommt die Flut.
Musicians Peter Gabriel, vocals, synthesizer, synth bass, and whistles, David Rhodes, guitar, Jerry Marotta, drums, percussion, Larry Fast, synthesizer, synth bass, Kate Bush, backing vocals, Steve Lillywhite, whistles, Hugh Padgham, whistles.
Jetzt kommt die Flut. Das sind die Nacht von Fleisch und Blut. Sind die Meere still und ich ist nur noch Schweigen. dies nichts.
Critical reception.
Opinions about the album were divided. Gabriel was described by almost every epithet, from genius to average. In the September 1980 issue of Rolling Stone, Dave Marsh described Peter Gabriel as a tremendous record that sticks in the mind like the haunted heroes of the best film noirs, and engaged in pseudo-intellectual musings. Peter Gabriel's third album, clear and expressive in style, is remembered like the villains of the best horror films. Its intrusive, gloomy mood brings to mind A Big Sleep, or rather Until Breathless Jean-Luc Godard. If anyone, Gabriel is perfectly aware of his sources of inspiration. There is an atmosphere of nervous excitement here, unhealthy, even paranoid, but born not so much of fear as of a pervasive sense of guilt. If rock music were to take the blame for the original sin, it would be in the person of Peter Gabriel. Peter Gabriel's methods are similar to those of Graham Greene, Raymond Chandler, and Eric Ambler. At first, he assumes the existence of an innocent society, watches it from a distance, and gradually but inevitably is drawn into the course of dreams. Finally, he loses control over where observation ends and complicity begins. Such is the morality of today. Even if one chooses to remain passive, one is complicit. Marsh continued his rambling argument, ending it with the conclusion: Peter Gabriel foresees a grim past from which there is no turning back. Nick Kent wrote in New Musical Express, "I have only had this record for 3 days, but the shocking message of its content, the suggestiveness of its vision, and the expressiveness of its execution are so striking in every bar, so compelling and consistently applied, that your reviewer is now in a state of absolute awe of the achievement that is Peter Gabriel's third solo album." Kent concluded his review with this prognosis: "I am convinced that this record will become one of the defining works of music in the 80s. It is a great step forward for Gabriel, who has proven that he is only just coming into his own in today's music, and a personal triumph for an artist who honestly expresses his worldview and his hierarchy of values. The result is a bold album that should be given close attention by all who want to know something about rock music today." However, a week later, the same New Musical Express published another review by Paul Morley. Kent's editorial colleague was much less kind, calling Gabriel the David Essex for thinking people, and describing the album as an effective mixture of eccentricity, pessimism, delusion, and madness, expertly crafted and spiced with enough philosophical and political allusions to cure even the most mindless rock listeners of their complexes. He also added that the album was admirable in its sincerity, but artistically shallow. Gabriel felt offended by Morley's unfounded attacks and gradually lost confidence in the music press. He said about the reviews of his next album, "It seems to me that only a dishonest artist can claim that he is not bothered by hurtful reviews. They not only cause pain, but also discourage." The critics of the New Musical Express, apart from one Kent, were exceptionally venomous in their attacks, which in turn provoked intolerance from Gabriel, who ordered that no concert tickets, press releases, or records be sent to the New Musical Express. The mutual animosity ceased only in 1987, when the editors, under different management, attempted to renew the broken contacts. With that dramatic double drum strike, the third album is wrapped up. Through his embracing of new technologies such as the Fairlight and studio experimentation in creating new sounds, such as the gated reverb on the drums or imposing restriction on himself and his fellow musicians, he had produced an album that was streets ahead of his contemporaries. Even David Bowie's foreboding Scary Monsters and Super Creeps was 4 months from release. The themes of isolation, alienation, and fear appeared to echo the mood of the times as perfectly as if Gabriel really did have his finger on the underlying pulse of popular culture. Melt, sounding as if it was recorded in an industrial landscape, was a marked improvement on Scratch. Surely the En Vogue producer, Steve Lillywhite, and engineer Hugh Pedgham had something to do with it.
The third album sold 250,000 copies. Sales were helped by extensive play, Games Without Frontiers on US Top 40 radio, though the song was not a hit in the States.
Atlantic Records apart, the third album is regarded as the one that established Peter Gabriel as an important artist and paved the way for future success. Within 2 years of dropping Gabriel, Atlantic were offering to buy him back for an advance of $750,000. In the UK, the album, again just known as Peter Gabriel, was straight to number 3 after its release on May 31st, 1980. The following weekend became Gabriel's first number 1 record. In 1989, Peter Gabriel was ranked at number 46 on Rolling Stone's list of the 100 best albums of the 1980s. In 2000, Q placed the album at number 53 on its list of the 100 greatest British albums ever. 6 years later, the magazine placed it at number 29 on its list of the 40 best albums of the 1980s. In 2018, Pitchfork ranked Peter Gabriel in 125th place on its revised and expanded list of the 200 best albums of the 1980s.
In the 2020, Rolling Stone included this record in their 80 Greatest Albums of 1980 list, praising Gabriel for a haunting LP that touches on political assassinations, family snapshot, the futility of war, games without frontiers, and the brutal murder of South African activist Steve Biko. He made more popular albums after this one, but never better ones.
I don't really hate you.
The tour.
Peter Gabriel called the tour promoting his third album, China 1984. He remembers, "It was my first bald tour, and there it was voluntary baldness. One of the things at that time was that a lot of bands were keen to get me the first to play in China. There was a lot of press about it. So I thought that I would do the tour merchandise for a fictitious Chinese tour, and it was a tour of China 1984. We used Chairman Mao's Little Red Book, which had had more copies of it sold, or at least distributed, than any other book, as the model for the tour program. That was fun to do. Gabriel has never played a concert in China, but in 1994, he did play Hong Kong Stadium on the Secret World Tour. But that was 3 years before the British gave up control over the colony, after which it became the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China. True to its name, the Red Book really was little. It was about the size of the palm of a person's hand. The 1980 tour program suggested a dystopic work of fiction, echoing Orwell's 1984 in the name of the tour, which was Tour of China 1984, thereby confusing historians for all time. The entire fun of the program, one might say, was that Gabriel was not touring China, and it was not 1984. Basically, it was all a mindfuck. The tour was limited to the United Kingdom and North America.
Leicester, Great Britain. De Montfort Hall. 24th of February, 1980, Sunday. Peter Gabriel.
Peter plays with politics and passion. Concert review by Lynn Hanna.
The sound of Supertramp is switched off. The house lights are left on. Skeins of synthesizer drift through the speakers, backed by empty echoes of percussion and static drips of electronic sound. There is silence. The IT starts again. And stops. The house lights dim. On cue, the audience start cheering. And handheld spotlights start spearing the hall, bleaching one odd face after another. Men are moving through the audience, their lights continually exposing slices of the crowd. It's unnerving. You wonder, will it hit me? As the haphazard procession converges on the stage, they beam their lights briefly onto their own faces, between thin fluorescent tubes among slim stalks that support small stage lights. Peter Gabriel and his group start playing. It is the most impressive start to any concert I've seen. It is not merely spectacle. On stage, Gabriel is dressed identically to the rest of his group in a black boiler suit striped asymmetrically with white. He has short hair and a smooth face. Whether he is running, jogging, kneeling, or sitting on stage with his head held in his hands, his movements are economically controlled. He has a still, seemingly inscrutable center, the dancer's ability to make each gesture pregnant with import. Even when he turns his back, he's riveting. He is the perfect performer. Although Mother of Violence is superb, the childish ululations at the end exquisitely chilling, and On the Air blazes brilliantly, I'll pass over the old material. His new songs are stunning. The clue to them and him is in a song, which since I didn't catch the title, I'll call Punishment and Learning. He explains that it is based on the famous American experiment in which volunteers were split into teachers and learners. The teachers were told to assist the pupils by administering punishment in the form of electric shock. It was discovered that 63% of the volunteers were prepared to administer charges of 450 volts, which would have severely damaged or exterminated the learner. Unbeknown to the teachers, the learners were actors simulating pain. It shows just how far they'd go before questioning authority. It also shows something about Gabriel himself, because during the concert, Peter Gabriel is an authority. He knows it, and he's using his position with immense intelligence and laudable integrity. That is why between each song he jokes with the audience, talking calmly and naturally. That is why he fellows a song with the disturbing emotional intensity and ultimately manipulative pulver of punishment and learning with the release and relief modern love. And that is why at the beginning of the evening the group illuminated and involved the audience. Gabriel isn't shedding his responsibility, he's sharing it. He goes one step further. He gives himself. During Games Without Frontiers, he is plainly nervous. He sings scrappily, makes spluttering attempts at mime, loses control of his careful external incarnation. At first, I think he's scared of the song's success, but he nods curtly to the drummer who continues to beat, approaches the edge of the stage, and falls face first into the audience. This reveals more than the fact that does care that he needs approval as much as possibly more so than the rest of us. It is a conscious admission of his own essential self. It also makes sense that the Genesis nursery rhymes and tales, the reference to games, toys, and the paraphernalia of childhood that are still splattered in his work. Whilst Gabriel has retained the child's porous, penetrating perception, he also still has the child's acute sensibility that is easily squashed. Revealing himself is an act of courage for a man who uses his performance as protection. His new work is immediate, mature, direct, and devastating. Sound and sight are often inseparable. Both involve the frequent use of contrast. The texture ranges from the simple strip sound of piano, voice, and percussion to the full, colorful blend of whole band. More than ever, he's using his music as a measured medium to transmit his own intellect and emotion. If this also implies instruction, it is only in the sense that his work demands thought. He introduces each song carefully, but it's hard to assimilate their full import on his hearing. Family snapshot deals, I suspect, broadly with American politics, specifically with the death of John Kennedy as seen through the eyes of the president's assassin. In another new song, he becomes a passive incarnation of an asylum inmate, and the sound changes from a calm stream of gentle piano and trickling xylophone to lost, unearthly screams of unbearable, orchestrated angst. He finishes the set with Biko, an ethnic rhythmic chant in which he uses his immense power as a performer to deliver an explicit, intensively moving indictment of apartheid based on the death of Steve Biko. You can blow out a candle, but you can't blow out a fire. The song is also a simple, forceful tribute that is rich with pure, fierce sorrow, and I can't have been the only person present who was fighting back bitter tears. Gabriel has stopped telling tales, playing hide and seek, dressing up his ideas in amusing disguises. He now says what he means and means what he says. Peter Gabriel has grown up. Lynn Hanna. A word of explanation from the creator of this material. The song that Lynn Hanna mentions in her review and gives it the title Punishment and Learning is actually We Do What We're Told, Milgram's 37, and would not be released until the album, so in 1986.
Lottie plays with Jane, Jane plays with Willie, Willie is happy then. Susie plays with Leo, Sasha plays with Brit. I don't build some on fire, Enrico plays with him. Whistle the church with her, the church by the seaside. Had to move quietly to creep across creaky wooden floors. I know where to find precious things in all your cupboards and drawers. Slipping the clippers through the telephone wires. A sense of isolation inspires.
Gabriel wanted someone with studio experience to be sound engineer on the 1980 tour and asked David Lord, who as a composer he had been commissioned by major artists and organizations, including singer Janet Baker, harpsichordist George Malcolm, guitarist Julian Breen, the London Symphony Orchestra, and the Aldeburgh, Dartington, Cheltenham, Farnham, and Bath music festivals. As a record producer and engineer, he has worked with numerous popular artists such as Peter Gabriel, XTC, Tears for Fears, Ice House, Echo and the Bunnymen, Jean-Michel Jarre and the Corgis, as well as producing a number of classical music albums. David Lord ran also the local Crescent recording studio in Bath. Initially David's home studio, it evolved into an internationally renowned facility, used by many leading artists and record labels in the 1980s and 1990s. After several years of being renamed Terra Incognita, the studio is now known as Interstate Studio. Eventually, Peter asked Lord if he wanted the position. For Lord, a softly spoken, classically trained composer, it was an enticing idea, though he could not predict how much of a culture shock life on the road would be. The tour, China 1984, started on February 20th, 1980 in Exeter, England, and the whole tour ended in Porto, Portugal on September 8th, 1980 at the Pavilhão dos Desportos. The musicians participating in this tour were Peter Gabriel, vocals, keyboards, John Ellis, guitar, Jerry Murata, drums, Larry Fast, keyboards, and alternately either Tony Levin bass or John Giblin bass. Tony Levin was unable to participate in all the shows on the tour due to various contractual obligations with other artists.
Newcastle, Great Britain. City Hall. March 3rd, 1980. Peter Gabriel. Great stuff from Gabriel. Concert Review by Jim Gilchrist.
Peter Gabriel, Newcastle City Hall. Extraordinary ex-Genesis frontman Peter Gabriel made a triumphant return to Newcastle as part of his tour of China 1984. Peter has played the City Hall many times before, but surely none were as good as his performance last week, and that includes when he was with Genesis. From an unusual beginning to a glorious end, Gabriel and his form and band displayed a marvelous set of excellent music full of new ideas, imagination, and strength. How many times do you go to a show where the new members are included just to fill in time between the older, better-known numbers? Gabriel's new material is strikingly good, futuristic, sometimes depressing, and very different. His new album, yet to be released and again called Simply, Peter Gabriel, was well aired on stage, and I cannot wait to slap it onto the turntable. Peter's last album, his second, hinted he was trying something very different from everybody else. It was certainly a far cry from his Genesis days, and his recent concert tour has confirmed his obvious talent. Dressed in black jumpsuits, the band took the stage in their typical fashion, walking through the audience. They walked from the back of the arena to the stage, adorned with bright white lights, shaking hands with the audience. Gabriel, 30, short but confident, strolls across the stage. His regular rhythm player, drummer Jerry Murata, and bassist Tony Levin, who has been with Gabriel since the first album, drive the show. Larry Fast on synthesizer and keyboards cuts through the sound well, and guitarist John Ellis complements the melody. I Don't Remember, Family Snapshot, and Shock Treatment give the crowd something new to listen, but they all rise to acclaim the excellent modern love from the first album. Morabine the Burgermeister gets a roar and the pace increases. Fluorescent lights come to life in rainbow shades. Gabriel entertains. He was something to observe. Came in close, I heard a voice. Standing, stretching every nerve, had to listen. Had no choice, my heart going boom boom. Sang the crowd to the 1977 single, Salisbury Hill. They love it. Games Without Frontiers, his new hit single, jangles along, and the crowd sing Just Sans Frontier. It's a knockout. Fear is the Mother of Violence is touching, and Biko should become the new Gabriel anthem. Gabriel gets his message across. Everybody's behind him this time. He has no mask to hide him. He doesn't need one.
Jim Gilchrist.
Gabriel's shows usually began with performers carrying torches to the audience and Gabriel arriving from the back of the hall like a weird creature, as the unusual drums and sound effects from the beginning of Intruder were being played. Presumably to match the tour's bizarre totalitarian China parody, the band wore black, overall-like jumpsuits, and each audience member was given a program booklet made to look like the 1966 book quotations from Chairman Mao Zedong. The booklet included Gabriel's head superimposed over those of other individuals, as well as Chinese newspaper ads, political posters, and comic books. In June 1980, Gabriel and the band spent a week rehearsing for their American tour at a Los Angeles warehouse belonging to Supertramp. They wanted to play a warm-up gig and found a small club in Santa Ana, Los Angeles. We were playing some quite big venues, so we were attracted to the idea of playing a 200-seater club. David Lord remembered. The word got around that he was going to play there. People hitchhiked down from Canada, and tickets were being sold for vast sums. We started the show, and it was absolutely packed until the doors were bursting. The fire marshals who had been monitoring the club for possible offenses decided to stop the show. Police helicopters were called in with spotlights shining down. The police raided the place. They drove all their cars up against the doors, so nobody could get out. They came in and photographed everybody, so they had proof the fire regulations were being broken. It was touch and go whether the audience would riot because they were so annoyed at the show being stopped. Peter was trying to persuade the police to let us carry on, say it would be less dangerous, but they wouldn't listen to him. The club owner, who had broken a hire agreement by advertising the show, was prosecuted for the fire offenses. The American leg, which ended in New York 3.5 weeks later, was buoyed by the success of the third album, Peter Gabriel 3 Melt, moved into US Top 40 while the tour was on, proving to Gabriel's bestseller yet. It gave Gabriel the satisfaction he wanted in proving Atlantic Records wrong in dropping it.
Santa Barbara, Arlington Theater, California, USA. June 18th, 1980. Wednesday. Peter Gabriel. No self-exposure. Concert review by Mark Cooper.
Sure. Nice. Great. My brother's here, but he wants to go out somewhere. All right, that's cool.
The second show of Gabriel's American tour sold out, but not as crowded as the first, which was canceled by the local Kojaks. The interventions of the authority tickled Gabriel, whose recent work centers on the activities of the powerful and the powerless. Genesis t-shirt abound, but Peter is the hero as the spotlight shapes and silhouettes his every gesture. And every gesture is planned, part of the message, part of the show. While Gabriel has abandoned costumes, he's neither abandoned stage control nor his commitment to acting. This is mental music. Self-exposure is not part of the deal. Lights, music, and gesture have all been meticulously worked out to create a theatrical package that owes more to bleak modernist theater than to our average stunning stupid rock extravaganza. Gabriel is a cult figure in America, a charisma king who is too much of an actor to be a personality in the showbiz sense. Between numbers, the introduces the numbers to follow with explanations that thrive on a dry wit that gives nothing of himself away. His look remains troubled and humble, an over-troubled, good-looking schoolboy with the weight of the world on his shoulders. Gabriel's characters and what he has to say are the center of the show, not Gabriel himself. This is both the strength and weakness of his act. Rock as an amateur art traditionally thrives on spontaneity, which progressive art rock tends to lack. Gabriel's controlled orchestration treats each song like a formalized and completed video. The lights know where to look, and the only excitement comes from the inevitable blunders which such planned performances produce. Yet even when Gabriel makes a mistake, he remains an actor, bowing an apology to the audience in character. The control that Gabriel praises in DIY on the second album is total, and he exercises it. Spontaneity suffers, but at Gabriel's best, art prospers. Yes, folks, art, this is clever stuff, ordered in cinematic arrangements, full of references to musical styles, each song with a subject and a theme to explore. So the Biko bagpipes are both a lament and full of the sound of imperialist armies that police South Africa. Gabriel works with connections, the media, childhood guns, and the need for attention, all revealed in intimate connection in Family Snapshot. These are the sinister undertones that Gabriel delights in exploring. Glum before the horror and ironies of modern life, Gabriel on stage is wistful, a boyish and humble clown who portrays a series of personages at the edge or over with the aid of the best technology, bars of light, cordless mics, and necklace bass. John Ellis on lead guitar is outstanding at conveying the violence of the boot boy character to be found in many of the songs, and he and bald-headed Tony Levin on innumerable basses add to the character of the songs. By the end of the set, which features all the new records and such treasures as Salisbury Hill, the audience is left in a state of awe and reverence. Yet the cost of Gabriel's insistence on total artistic control is a certain deadness, a tendency to be impressive rather than moved. Overly intellectual albums work like comedy records. They did fast. As long as Gabriel remains aloof, omniscient and artistic, he'll remain impressive and slightly sterile. But as the show bore out, he's getting closer to a successful fusion. Mark Cooper.
At the beginning of the tour, Random Hold, featuring David Rhodes, served as support. However, the band was on the verge of disbanding, and the less than successful performances only accelerated the decision to disband. I think we had a lot of good ideas, but we couldn't execute them well, so it didn't really work. People didn't like us, and we weren't selling records. We played with Peter in the UK and the US, and we were supposed to play in Western Europe. But the truth is, we weren't enjoying touring. That's when I left Random Hold, and Simple Minds took over as support, recalls David Rhodes. Attendance at Peter Gabriel's concerts increased significantly. Strong album sales and the success of the single Games Without Frontiers did their job. Gabriel's commercial surge reignited speculation about the similarities and differences between him and Genesis. Gabriel's former band was already a global powerhouse. The album Duke topped sales charts across almost the entire civilized world, and the songs Turn It On Again and Misunderstanding stormed the charts even in the US. Banks, Collins, and Rutherford enjoyed stardom under the band's banner, but Gabriel still enjoyed a veil of artistic, magical mystery that his former bandmates were slowly losing. Some fans who attended Gabriel's concert at the Greek Theater wore Genesis t-shirts, but banner hung in the audience, reading, "Genesis are great, but Gabriel is God," spoke volumes, wrote Robert Hilburn in a report for Pop Beat. Leaving aside their earlier collaborations, it must be said that today Genesis and Gabriel represent completely different musical worlds. While Genesis became mired in conservative, polite pop rock, Gabriel emerged as one of the most important figures in contemporary rock. Genesis lost much of their ambition after Gabriel's departure, while he remained a very coherent, focused, and compelling writer. His lyrics are more understandable and better defined. Peter, like Bowie on his best albums, is currently interested in the tensions between civilizations. However, he doesn't achieve mass popularity. He lacks Bowie's charisma and, moreover, demands too much of himself in terms of musical references. A bit of Stax here, a bit of disco there. As a result, the elegant Gabriel, accompanied by synthesizers, is more difficult to accept than Bowie. At the end of the concert, Peter said that we don't live in pleasant times. This was a preview of the evening's highlight, Biko, a powerful account of the South African leader's murder. This song pulled Gabriel out of his fictional aura and transported him to reality. The singer made the mistake of not ending the concert with this piece. The encore compositions lacked atmosphere. Overall, the evening's repertoire wasn't skillfully put together, making the concert feel like a jumble of individual episodes rather than a cohesive presentation. Gabriel talks about wanting to weave a larger concept from the small elements of his character. If he succeeds, he could become one of the most important rock artists of the 1980s. His songs are challenging. One thing is certain, Gabriel demands too much from all those who sometimes snooze.
Once the flame begin to catch, the wind will blow me higher. My Biko,
Peter generally received good reviews and was warmly received by audiences, but there were some very unpleasant exceptions. On September 4th, 1980, at the Eisbohrthal in Berlin, Germany, Gabriel opened for Frank Zappa on his German tour. In Berlin, the crazy Frank Zappa fans clearly weren't in the mood for Gabriel's warm-up. People were throwing things at me, trying to hit me. Peter recalled, "There was one guy there who shouted at me, 'Get the fuck home, you English pig.' I crawled onto the stage and started playing Here Comes a Flood, one of my quietest songs. It wasn't the best idea. After a while, I had to leave the stage. For me, as a performer, it was the worst night of my life. Before, I'd always been afraid something like this would happen, until it finally did." Once the initial shock and pain had subsided, I had to adopt a different attitude. After a day's break, the next concert took place in Bremen, and even with the thought that the incident might happen again, I was relaxed. I laughed, felt at home, and the crowd started to respond. Ultimately, we put on a better show, but most importantly, I overcame the fear of audience rejection. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. This uplifting bond and motif would prove useful to Peter. A new decade was slowly beginning, and in its second half, enormous global success awaited, but to achieve it, Gabriel still had a long way to go, overcoming several barriers and weaknesses, establishing himself artistically, and becoming more sane commercially. So to sum up, both the album Peter Gabriel 3, Melt, and the China 1984 tour, supporting it turned out to be quite a success at the time, although the real and great successes, as I wrote above, were still to come.